Someone who knows a great deal about embracing the unknown and learning from failure is Mike Quinn, a two-time founder and author of Failing to Win. His first startup in Africa made a huge impact on the economy and people. But listen to what Mike says about the reality of the startup's highs and lows.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Quinn, and in 2009, I moved to Zambia and co-founded one of Africa's first fintech startups called Zona. We scaled Zona from 0 to 2 million active customers, which was 25% of Zambia's adult population. They transacted more than $60 million per month on our platform, and we raised $35 million in global venture capital, including closing one of the continent's first Series A rounds for a fintech startup. During the 10 years when I was CEO, we earned $86 million in revenue and paid $26 million in commissions to a network of 3,000 micro entrepreneurs who served as Zona agents. These numbers all sound great, but the reality behind the scenes was very different. There were always fires burning, and it felt like we were failing all of the time. As CEO, I felt that I was personally responsible for these failures, especially at the end of my journey when we had a big investment round collapse and we had to restructure our company. In April 2019, I stepped down as CEO and exited the company. I really felt like a failure, or at least that I had failed to win. With encouragement from my wife, I sat down and started writing a long personal reflection on what went wrong. When I was done, I had a letter to myself of my 8 biggest failures and what I learned from them. I later published this as a book called Failing to Win, which is available on Amazon and an audiobook on Audible. I'd like to share 3 of these lessons with you now. Here's the first one. For a long time, me and my 3 co-founders failed to become a team. In the beginning, there was so much work to do that we were all just trying to get stuff done as fast as possible. But as we started to grow, we kept getting in each other's way. For the first few years, we were constantly arguing and fighting with each other, and there wasn't much teamwork. I was a first-time CEO, and it took me a long time and a good coach to help me confront our problems, just as our founding team was nearing a breaking point. I brought in an external facilitator who helped us learn about each other's personalities, strengths, weaknesses, and motivations in a safe space. We then went into how to make and execute decisions and design principles and norms for communicating and giving each other feedback. It was a hard and emotional process, but once we came through it, we had built a foundation to start becoming a functional team. Eventually, we would become a great team, but it took us a long time. When I started my second company, Boost, I put a lot of thought into getting this right up front. The first thing I did was write down my values and what I'm good at, what brings me energy, and what I want my role to be. I then wrote down the opposite of these in a separate document, which became a profile to go recruit a co-founder. By being really purposeful, I was able to find 2 amazing co-founders who share my values and who I really enjoy working with, but who are also wired very differently from me. Looking back, we became a high-performing team much, much faster and with much less stress and conflict this time around. A second failure we experienced at Zona was failing to focus. For a long time, we kept taking on new projects without thinking through what we could execute well. This became a cultural norm as our team grew, and our costs rapidly increased as we needed more and more resources to fuel the new projects. Eventually, it seemed we were running faster and faster on a hamster wheel as our forward progress ground to a halt. When you're a startup, it's really important to try out many things because you don't know in advance what's going to work. How you do this is what really matters. It's important up front to formulate a clear hypothesis and then ask, how might we test this as quickly and cheaply as possible? If it works, design a new test to scale it up, but if it doesn't, then cut it. If something starts working very well, you will know, and then you will have to start cutting other things to properly focus on it. This is how you build something awesome that scales. It's also important to apply resource constraints. We made the mistake of continuously hiring new people rather than fixing our team size and solving for what we could execute really well. At Zona, it took us years and we burned a lot of cash to figure out what to focus on. When we eventually did, our business took off. Eventually, and after a lot of failing, Zona started growing really fast and we thought we were ready to expand into new markets. But this ended up leading to one of our biggest failures. We raised a big round of investment and hired a new market expansion team led by a new executive. Over the next year, we would burn through $6 million trying to expand into a new market with very little to show for it. Eventually, we would have to pull out of the market and lay off the entire team. Looking back, we didn't understand the new market, which was very different from our core market in Zambia. Our recently hired team and executive also didn't understand what had made us successful in Zambia because they weren't around when we were figuring it out. And because we had a bank account full of cash and a new investor pushing us to expand, we kept throwing money at the problem for too long, rather than hitting the pause button when things weren't working out the way we had expected. What I learned from this was to treat each new market as a startup, rather than an expansion. We've taken this approach at Boost, where we launched Ghana, South Africa, and Nigeria with local founding teams who were responsible for figuring out what works in their market with very lean startup budgets, rather than trying to force something from the top down. This has worked much better for a fraction of the cost. And what has really been amazing to watch is a team from one market share their learnings that are then applied by a team in another market. My biggest advice to aspiring founders is to embrace and learn from failure. If you're going to start a company from scratch and build it to something meaningful at scale, you're going to fail a lot. You may fail completely, as many startups do, or you may be successful, but your success will be the outcome of a long string of failures that preceded it. What's critically important, though, is to separate failing from being a failure. Failing sucks and is emotionally draining. It's easy to stay down afterwards with a voice inside your head telling you that you're a failure. You're not, you just failed, which is a completely normal and shared human experience, especially for entrepreneurs. If you can get that mindset right, you then need to learn from the failure. This requires reflecting deeply and being vulnerable enough to find out the real reasons for why it happened. This is hard work. If you can do this effectively, you will keep growing as a person. This isn't a guaranteed formula that your startup will be successful, but it will greatly increase your chances over the long run. It will also help you enjoy the ride a lot more. Thank you for having me, and good luck.